I'll try not to do the thing I did last time, which
Hello?
was start, presenting the screen and the screen's not even being shared. So I'll try not to make all the beginner errors here with the webinar tonight. So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. I am Mike Davila and I am joined by my business partner, Anne-Marie Hatfield. Tonight, I know you were told we're going to be talking about essays, but we're going to do a little switcheroo on you. We're going to talk about college lists first because we need to actually have a college list before we do essays. So anyway, that's our topic of interest tonight, is how to create a great college list. And the format for these monthly webinars, if you've been in on these with us before, we usually present for, 20 minutes or so on a topic, and then we allow any and all questions regarding the topic. And then afterwards, if we exhaust that quickly, the world's your oyster. Just fire away questions at Anne-Marie and I, and we'll try to answer them the best we can. So just a little bit of administrative stuff. I know that most of you guys are on mute, which is great, but feel free to unmute yourselves and ask questions. If you like to show your camera, that's great too. If not, that's fine. And I don't know, what else am I forgetting here, Anne-Marie, in terms of ground rules?
Yep, I think you got them all.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then we're going to talk about creating some college lists. Okay, so you should be seeing the screen. Anne-Marie, do you see my screen now? Everything good? Yeah, okay, great. Awesome. So again, it's Anne-Marie and myself here tonight with you. What are we actually going to be talking about tonight? So let me get that queued up and do the actual thing. Oh, that's weird. Sorry, gang. PowerPoint has this weird preview and it's not letting me into that right now. So you're not seeing my screen anymore. Sorry, I knew this was going to happen. Okay, what are we going to cover? Here we are. So, hey, who's involved in this process? Who can we turn to for help? Whose role is whose? How do we navigate this? That sort of thing. Wow, I'm having problems. Okay, I think I'm just deleting slides here. That is not smart. So yeah. That was crazy. Let me undo all of that. Okay. Okay. So what are we going to cover? I'm pausing here, gang. I am so sorry. This is really awkward. Let me save what I have here. Let me present the screen. Let me stop the share. Okay. We're going to try this again. Share screen one this time. Okay. And let me go to this. Okay, it's the wrong screen. All right, we're just going to go at this view here. Okay, so who's involved? Who's doing what? What's the goal for each student? What's the timing of college list creation? What extra items should I really be looking for when searching for a college? And what in the world has changed since I created a college list for myself way back when? So those are some of the things we're going to be talking about. So some of the things that have absolutely changed since all of us approached the college age. One, students are super portable now. It's not uncommon for us to create college lists where students are saying, hey, I want to go someplace, but not Texas. So probably back in our day and age, we stayed fairly local. That's at least what the demography tells us. But it's very common for students to be looking all over the place to change their geographic preferences during the time that they're with us in this consulting process. All of that is just fine. The other thing is there are many, many more choices than ever before. There are almost 6,500 majors. There are 2,400 four-year colleges. So you can see that those choices have ballooned since we've been going, we were college age students. The finance picture, don't have to talk about that much tonight. We all know that it's exorbitantly expensive to send students to college. And so all of us are very focused on return on investment. We're looking at how much is it going to cost us, not just for room and board tuition, but books and travel and everything else that it's going to take to send a student to New York City, for example. Hyperselectivity, I want to talk to that a little bit tonight, and I've got a specific slide on that. One of the trends that I have seen, and Anne-Marie, you might echo this, is that over the last few years, there's been this really intense focus on the most visible schools. Both what our clients and everybody else across the country and around the world is trying to get into the very most selective schools. So it's really important that we understand the game that's being played right now with these schools. So we'll talk to that a little bit. Students are moving to colleges through non-traditional paths. Every other week, my consulting staff and I will have a meeting with a college rep. Typically, we met the other day with the Berlin team rep because there are a lot of students that will say, hey, it's great. Engineering at A&M is what I want, but I don't know if I have the chops to get in directly to A&M's engineering program. How do we do this if we want to go through an alternate path? So those non-traditional paths are becoming more and more prevalent, I think, for a lot of students. There's definitely more marketing from colleges. There are visit days or accepted students days. There's tons of emails. There's, you name it, colleges or businesses, and they're inundating students, and they have been for many years on the marketing front. And sometimes this more information isn't helpful. It becomes overloading to students. And students are already hyper busy as it is. So sometimes students just shut down. And we'll talk about maybe some of the things that can break that during the process. So it may seem overwhelming. We're going to break it down into the extreme basics tonight for everybody. So don't sweat. Okay. So who's in charge of this effort? Okay. So we all are. Okay. That's kind of the answer here. It's definitely a team effort. So your student has a consultant, an educational consultant whose job it is to meet with the students and the parents to formulate the initial, what I call the suspect list of colleges. This can change over time. As I'd mentioned before, this initial list of schools is based on criterion that your student and you have had input into the consultant on through a program we call Coursava. And it's essentially a virtual card sort. And that helps us understand really what are the most important factors for each student. And there's 100 or so factors that we're going to go through with each student on that. The student, their job is to research the colleges. And when I meet with students, I'm always pretty pointed with the students saying, hey, I can help you. I can get the forest and knock it down to a grouping of trees, but I need you to dive into that small group of trees to see which one is really going to be the best one for them. Because it's not me going to college. It's not you as parents going to college. It's them. So they have to eat the food, do the virtual tour. They have to really be comfortable with that college. And I don't use this story very often, but I think back to my first day at the U.S. Naval Academy. My first roommate lasted 9 hours. I am pretty sure that student had no idea what they were getting into, and they started getting yelled at about 4 p.m. and said, nope, I'm out. This is not fun. So the student is definitely in charge of the final list. You're not going to hear our staff say, you must apply to this school, or you have to apply to that school. That's not our process. We don't want to force things down people's throat. Now, if the student gets deep into the process, they're like, I have 15 schools on the list. I have really no idea how to get it down to 8 or 9 or 10. Absolutely, text into the portal, and we'll be there to help knock that list down to the nubbins there. And I would also mention that students giving feedback to consultants is very important. So if a consultant creates an initial list, and hey, the grouping seems fine, but there's 3 or 4 schools on here, we have no idea why those were ending up on the list. Like I had one of these the other day for a student in Maryland, and Towson was a pick that I put on there because financial affordability for that family is extremely important, and it's in their backyard, has all the right criterion. It's not super crazy hard to get into. And I told the family, I said, there's a reason why that school is on their list, because UMCP or Maryland College Park, hyper important or competitive for your major, and that's a financial and a nice fallback for the family. And they said, yep, got it. For parents, it's their responsibility to have a discussion regarding fit and finance with the student. So it's definitely your money typically going to college. So there are a lot of colleges, and we'll look at one tonight that's $80,000 a year. And feel free to tell the consulting staff, yep, that's way too much money. We're not paying that. We can do X or Y or Z. But we also want you to have that discussion with your students so that the student also understands that here are the parameters that the family can actually do. And so we don't want to on our side, the horror story would be to get all the way through, have a student go through and do all their applications and essays. And then in the 11th hour, right before college decision day, oh, wait, these colleges are all ridiculously expensive for the budget. So help us understand.
I was just going to say that's a really hard conversation to have at this point in the process when the kid is a senior and all of the schools that they've gotten into are outside of the family's budget. So it's much better to address the budget question early on than it is after your kid has gotten into all of these amazing schools, but the family doesn't want to pay the amount of money those colleges cost. So
Yes,
doing it
absolutely.
earlier is much better.
Yep. And so then what is our goal in doing this? And so to understand our goal as a company or as a firm, it's important to understand our bias. Okay. So I came into this process as a former financial advisor at Merrill Lynch. And so for me, affordability for college was always something in the back of my mind. So we want to find an affordable, realistic grouping of colleges that create a superior learning opportunity for your student. Now, notice realistic grouping of schools. I've had people blow back on that and say, wait a second, my student has got these grades and this SAT score, et cetera. And it's not a comment around the student's abilities, but I think it's important for all of us to realize we're in a totally different environment than we were 5 or 10 years ago, where schools that are under 20% acceptance rates are there. The students that apply there are self-selecting. So it's hyper competitive to gain acceptance to some of those. And yeah, it's important for us as consultants to come in and give a realistic view of, we're going to shoot for some of those, but we need to also have some that are really targeted to you that we have a really good chance of getting into as well. So quality, affordability, the right programming, the right amenities, absolutely. Those are going to be priorities for us as we do the search for your student, at least the initial search. What we also want to see are 8 to 10 applications go out the door. Usually in the summer, between junior and senior year and into the fall, early part of the fall is when the application season really happens in this day and age. And so we want to make sure, and yeah, there are special exceptions to this. There are sometimes when a student might only do 5 or 6 applications, but generally speaking, most of the students that we work with are going to do 8 to 10 applications in most situations. And again, we're trying to achieve balance within the college list so that we don't have huge surprises for anybody at the very end. And the factors can vary from student to student. Amory, what would you say the most number of colleges that you've seen a student apply to recently?
24.
24.
But they were a musical theater major.
Right.
And most of your musical theater students are going to apply for multiple colleges.
Absolutely. Can you think of other groupings of students that might do more than 10 applications?
Musical theater is the one that really pops into my brain, but
I've seen athletes, when they're trying.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's another good one, especially if they're not really sure where they want to play that particular sport. We're working with a family right now who I think has 14 schools on the list, and he added a whole bunch last minute because he went to a tournament and the coaches started expressing interest. That's a really good one, Mike.
Yeah, there's tons. I mean, there's other BSMD programs, it is totally custom to the student. And the idea here is that there are some firms that will say you can only do XYZ number of apps. We're not that way. If your student says we need to do 12, we're doing 12. We're going to do all the essay review for all of that, et cetera. Okay. Next, what is balance on a college list? What does it look like today? Well, traditionally, there have been 1 or 2 reach schools on the list. And I think it's important to highlight that because that to me sounds balanced. I've had some students in the last couple of years, especially, apply to a few more, and that's okay. But then we need to have at least a core of 6 or so colleges that you would call a fit or a target kind of school, where the acceptance rates look reasonable, where SAT, ACT ranges, GPAs, all of those things line up at least in the median or above of the applicant pool for the school. And if all that sounds like craziness, don't worry, I'm going to give you an example here in a minute. and a few safeties, and that could be a financial safety for some people. It could be an in-state public, and maybe not UT, unless we're top 6%. And more colleges for recruited athletes, talents, high flyers, et cetera, et cetera. And again, the strategy, these general figures are going to be morphed based on each student's goals and needs. Just know that deeper in the second semester of the junior year, we will rate each student's college list for admissibility. So you'll have color coding on the student's college list, and I'll show you that in a minute, which will say, hey, a human looked at the, Swarthmore for my student, and it was labeled orange or blue or whatever. And what does that mean? So we'll go into that in a sec. So before we dive into that, I want to share with you the top 12 factors in admissions today. Okay. This was taken from the IECA website, which is the Independent Educational Consultants of America. They do a survey each year for the most selected private schools and public schools in the country. And this is what comes back. And this changes from year to year, but this top one. The biggest thing is rigor and curriculum. Like, how did the student attack or go through each high school's curriculum? Did they take a bunch of AP or IB level classes? Did they do dual credit? Did they do early college start? Did they, do on-ramps kinds of work? In relation to what the high school offers. If you go to a high school that doesn't offer a lot of that, you're not going to be penalized for that in most cases. The grade point average, the performance, and notice that I put in here in core classes. So most very competitive schools don't really care about PE credit or how you did in choir. That's not going to be, unless you're, musical theater or whatever. But the idea is that most of the core classes are going to matter. And a lot of colleges will disaggregate the high school's transcript and only put in the core classes and things that are meaningful to them as indicators of success at their institution. And they've done ridiculous amount of institutional research, which shows them, hey, students from this high school generally do well when they have this kind of grade point average or above, based on previous classes. So it's a very data-driven game on the admissions side, especially for selected private schools and public schools. The SAT, ACT consistent with a grade point average in high school, passionate involvement in a few activities. And then, all of this kind of stuff, this involvement that your student, I know, has been involved in, it will pay off. And it's important for the student not only just to do the activities, but understand basics like, hey, why did I do this? What did I get out of the fact that I was a baseball player for the last 12 years? Those character traits that have been built are the things of essays, which are number 5 on the list. Leadership, initiative, diversity, in many different facets. Personalized recommendation letters. That's actually a little higher than in years past. Special talents and abilities, intellectual curiosity, the ability to do work outside of the school, extracurricular stuff, research that they have done, extra reading. All of that stuff can matter. Evidence of character and strong values, which again usually pop in the essay component of the application. And then finally, demonstrated interest. This didn't exist, when we were high school students, but the idea is that colleges are super advanced in terms of marketing. The ones that are non-Ivy, upper tier 1, they already have the corner on the market, but the schools that are in the next layer right underneath it in the middle tier of schools are desperately trying to find really good students. And they're doing a lot of marketing research and analysis as to whether or not your student is actually real in their applicant pool, to the point where some colleges will send out a bunch of emails, and how many links you click on shows up on their marketing system. Did you visit campus? Did you talk to the admissions rep? Did you apply early decision? All of these things give points, so to speak, to your student in their algorithms. So those are the top 12 things for admissions. This slide is a little dated now, but it tells the story, I think, pretty well, where there's 15 super hyper competitive schools with sub 10% acceptance rates, gaining almost 250,000 applicants for 12,000 spots. Gang, that is like a lottery. It doesn't get much better when we start to look at 15 or 20% acceptance rate schools getting 570,000 applications for 40,000 spots. So you can kind of see, we don't want to fill our entire basket up with these kinds of eggs where it's a recipe for disaster in the second semester of senior year if we were waitlisted and rejected at all these schools. Not saying that we shouldn't apply to some of them. That's not my point. It's just, hey, don't fill your entire list with that. Be critical and be reasonable in that calculus. So what about UT? For the class of 24, they received 57,000 applications. They have 8,000 freshman slots to fill. The top 6 are auto admitted into UT. So that's about 12,000 people. But you all know that there are some people, like half, that will actually not go to UT, even though they've been accepted and auto admitted. They'll go elsewhere. So about 50% of those students out of the 12,000 will actually fill seats. So there's only about 2,400 seats left open for non-top 6% Texas residents, out-of-staters, international people, baseball recruits, you name it. So it's hyper competitive. So if you're outside of the top 6%, it is like trying to get into Harvard. You basically have about a 6% admit rate outside of the top 6%. Is that fair? I don't know. That's the world we live in today. And A&M isn't far behind in terms of selectivity for some of its programs as well. So yeah, so we need to be diverse in our college universe and our final picks. Okay, so a few words about researching schools. And I'd like to actually go into a portal here and show you a student's. This is Joe Doe. So this is not an actual student. This is just a notional student, but your student has a portal. And when they log in, this is what they see. There's all sorts of, of nice little things in here. Your student's going to have a lot of different, texts and things going back and forth between them and our consulting staff. But over here on the left-hand side is the college tab. And so that we're going to focus our effort there tonight. When you click on that, it's going to show the application deadlines, but down here is the college list. And so the suggested colleges are going to be the ones that the Inroads team is going to create for your students specifically. And you can see that, this is just a completely random list, so don't pay attention to its quality or anything like that. But your student can go ahead and add these colleges over to their side of the list on the right-hand side, my list of schools, or they can add a school that they have not been recommended. That's totally fine. This is the student's place to play. And they can come in here and order these colleges to their heart's content. And oftentimes when I meet with the students, I'm asking them, hey, has this been updated? Is this really, what you're looking at in terms of your top choices? So once we're here, the student can dive in and start doing, I would call this top level research. So this is just a bit of a profile on SMU. It tells you how many students, like SMU's got its 6,600 undergraduates. Most people are surprised by that. Sometimes people think it's a smaller school than they show up on in the ratings, et cetera, or larger. Baylor's like double the size of SMU. It's somewhat selective. 52% of its students that apply are actually admitted. So that's pretty nice. But then we have to realize that SMU is mainly known for its business programming. So their business school is direct admit. You have to be admitted not only into the university, but also into the College of Business. And so that becomes a much lower admissions rate. When you look at the large public universities, it's the same thing. This is an aggregate number here for all the different majors. And then it gives you some real top level information about the students that are enrolled, et cetera, et cetera. Here's where it kind of gets a little bit more interesting in my mind. So if my grade point average is a 4.0 as a student, the average for somebody at SMU is 3.63 coming in. So that's nice. That's putting me in the top GPA applying into the school, which is great. Then you're going to have some markers. If the student has SAT or ACT scores, you can see where they're positioned in the freshman applicant pool from last year at SMU. So really important to know, student positioning teaches us that we want to be to the right of this purple little middle 50 percentile. That gives us the best possible chances for admissions. If the college gives merit aid, that does get us the best discount typically if we're in this right-hand range. Because again, this is a game. We're helping them look better in the rankings, et cetera. So they purchase students to do that. Here's a $79,000 cost. Now, this is labeled incorrectly. This is not tuition. Tuition is 58,000, and then all the other things add up to what's called the cost of attendance figure, and that's that 79. Many of us earn in the higher income ranges. So this data over here kind of gives you a ballpark range of what someone who's earning over 110,000 a year might actually have to pay on a bottom line for the school. If you want to get more granular with that type of data, you can go to this net price calculator here, and that should give you a little bit more granular understanding as a parent where that final price tag might be. For most of our students, we're going to ask them to dive a lot deeper than this, though. So there's a note page where students can go in and take notes. But mainly, I start at the top level with programming, and the students can look and see, hey, if I'm looking at, for example, Cox School of Business, I'm going to expand business and see, hey, wow, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's offered here. For a 6,000 person school, they have things like insurance as a major. Okay, fantastic. That's great. So you can look at all the programmings that the school has. The FISC guide is super important. This is a 50,000 foot view of the school. This used to be published, and still is, in a giant thick book. Not every school has a FISC guide profile, but this is really helpful. Oftentimes when I take students through the FISC guide, they're like, wow, I learned a lot. There's a lot in here I didn't know, and SMU's in our backyard. If you want to look at essays, that's great. That's fantastic. But I'm going to guide over to the research tab. Here, I will take students through some of these websites. Definitely the student should go into niche, okay? Niche, you can set up your own. This is an external website, but the student can set up their own profile in here, and it gives them everything from an overall grade, rankings. Will I get into my specific major in terms of scatter plots, ratings? It will talk about reviews. So there'll be thousands of students who've reviewed SMU. So you can see this portal is really a jumping off point for your student. Now I'm going to go back into the portal because one of the most important things we're going to have students do, I'm going to go back to the college list and go back to SMU, is to go to the college website. It sounds so basic, but I've had students who've not done the research, and they tell me, hey, I'm interested in University of Portland or whatever, and they haven't done the research. And most of the time, colleges are going to ask very specific essay questions as to, hey, why are you applying to my school? So going into the website, harvesting data out of that that's specific to them is very important, amongst other things. But we have an entire meeting that we will take your student through the research process. Okay, I'm going to flip back onto the slideshow. Okay, so these are the things we just talked through. Virtual tours are there, external website links like niche, the graduation rate, FISC guide, all of those things, key to researching. So very important that students are involved. We'll actually throw some fun at them and have them do a college fit treasure hunt.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Okay. Yeah, was there a question? I don't want to move on if there was. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and we'll take some questions at the end. So beyond the numbers, we all need to know that the transcript is the biggest driver. Essays are going to be hyper important. The short answer questions are super important in demonstrating interest. That's mainly because of what's happened in the last few years. SAT, ACTs are very important too if we're able to get superior scores in those. Otherwise, most colleges are still going to remain test optional for this cycle. But there are some schools that will go back to requiring tests, and there are a handful that were not test optional last year, like University of Florida, Florida State, Georgia. They required SAT, ACT scores for admission. So it's not like last year where we could say across the board, SAT, ACT is not important. They definitely are. US News and World Report rankings, the only thing I would say about them is it's a great data point, but know that the data that goes into the US News and World Report is all self-reported by colleges. So I have a little jaundiced eye when it comes to that sort of stuff, which is fine. Is it okay to change majors, change directions, to completely revamp the college list midstream? Absolutely. We don't expect every student at age 16 or 17 to know everything about what they need, and for things to change is very normal. So just let us know. That's all we ask is cut us in as early as possible on any changes, and we can make changes to the college list. No worries. Timing. When is the ideal to begin the college search process? Well, freshman year is kind of early. Yeah, definitely go to some college fairs. You might want to do a few tours around the area just informally. That's great. Sophomore year, it's getting warmer. Second semester, yeah, again, it's not important that we tour every school under the sun. Junior year definitely is the year for college tours, for virtual tours, for, kind of getting into that college list. That's a great time. Parents, we didn't do that. We waited till senior year. But senior year, we really need to be submitting applications in the later summer and early fall. So generally speaking, when we have some kind of SAT, ACT metrics to consider, that's going to be the time that we're going to get really focused on the college list. If we're not going to test and we're going to go test optional, that's okay. Just let us know. We'll be able to still do a good college search. So we can also use the SAT, ACT diagnostic test that we have if we need to help with some numbers. Okay, rating of college list. I had already mentioned this before. The color codes that you might see on your student's college list. Green, yeah, that's a likely admit. Blue is going to be, hey, we might get in, we may not. Orange, it means, yeah, it's a bit of a stretch. It's probable that we'll get a rejection. A red means it's highly likely that we're going to be rejected or waitlisted by the school. So just know what those mean. And there's the legend is there on the website, so no worries with that.
I would also say one thing about the ranking and the colors. We don't want all orange or red schools on the list. We want a nice mix. To Mike's point earlier, some schools we know we're for sure we're going to be able to get into. Some reaches in there as well, but we don't want all red and green on the list, or red and orange on the list.
Right on, right on. Okay, other things to consider if you would like to do your own searching. Fantastic. My favorite is the National Center for Education Statistics, or the College Navigator website. At this web address, if you just Google College Navigator, you'll find it. If you'd like to compare colleges side by side with data, graduation rates and admit rates and things like that, collegeresults.org is great for that. If you would like an overall view of a school and just, my favorite is Niche. It really is fantastic. It gives a great overview, and it's also something you could drill down into pretty deeply. So what to do now? Be in contact with admissions reps. If you are a junior and you are working on your college list and you're doing research, it's likely that you're going to have some questions. Sometimes the best person to actually reach out to is the college admissions rep. So that person is cataloging interest. They're going to know the answers or be able to put your student in hand in hand to resources if they have specific questions on curriculum or whatever. So it's fantastic to be in contact with the admissions rep. I remember even way back when I was approaching college, I did that. And my admissions rep told me, dude, you don't have the minimum math score to get accepted here. And I was just bullheaded. I kept on badgering the guy and they finally let me in. It was crazy. But do in-person tours if possible. Make sure we have feet on the ground if possible. There's nothing better than actually being on campus, seeing the types of students that are there, sitting in a class and having the experience as a student of seeing the professors working with students. Also know that the tour guides, they are very impressive. They're handpicked, they're groomed, but they're great to answer questions, but they may not give you the fullest picture of the campus from a student's perspective. So it's always fun to go off the beaten path, go to the student union or go to the cafeteria, the food areas, and then connect with students there that are not poster children for the school. Go to the YouTube, go to Campus Reel, do some virtual tours before you actually, book tickets to go someplace. And look at the course offerings. I'm always encouraging students to look at the curriculum because that's really what we're going to college for. And that can also help students understand what they're getting into and actually, generate questions and essay responses and stuff. Definitely let's finish this semester strong. If you're a junior, the 6th semester transcript tends to be the most important semester of your high school career in terms of grades. It's the last marker that they might see in many selective college admissions processes, unless they ask for 7th semester or mid-year grade reports for senior year, which does happen. Prep for the SAT, ACT, most students have done the March SAT or doing the April ACT or later exam. So we're right in the glide slope for that. And then I had mentioned demonstrating interest, and we will have an email that will go out that goes way more in depth to this, but basically it's showing up to play. Applying early decision is the biggest demonstration of interest. Showing up on campus is really substantial for a lot of schools. The connecting to admissions reps, going to the website, asking for more information, those kinds of things demonstrate interest. I also want to emphasize that we are in a fractured environment when it comes to demonstrated interest and selectivity. The highest selective schools don't care if you demonstrate interest. Most flagship public schools like UT or Michigan are not using demonstrated interest in their equation for admitting students. So just, it's important to know that. Okay, and what should my list look like when it's finalized? We should have 8 to 10 schools that have been thoroughly researched, that have the right major and all the right offerings. Socially are a really good fit for the student. They feel at home. Academically, they're challenged but not overwhelmed. Financially, it's a fit for the family. It fits in the budget, and it's a balance within the college list. There's, like to Anne Marie's point, it's not all orange and red schools. It doesn't always have to be all green, that sort of thing. So with that, I think we've wrapped up the information that I wanted to go through tonight. And I apologize, I definitely went more than 20 minutes, but I appreciate you all being here, and we'll open up for any and all questions.
Feel free to unmute. If you would rather not speak, you're welcome just to type it in the chat. Any questions?
Thank you for the meeting tonight. I just wanted to say we did our first college visit this over spring break. It was really informative.
Cool.
So it was University of Utah, and they said they were going to go to this year and next year is going to be a non-required SAT.
Cool.
Do you think that a lot of them, you said early on, do you think they're going to start next year requiring the SAT?
I think some will. It's really interesting, Michelle. A lot of colleges went test optional, and you know what happened? They got far more applicants than they'd ever had before, and they love that. That's like crack cocaine for colleges. So there are going to be a lot of colleges that are like, yeah, we don't need the SAT. We can look at a student's transcript, their resume, their essays, and we know that they'll be successful here. So I promise you there'll be a ton of schools that ditch the SAT and ACT forever.
I will say though, that if your student has taken the SAT, ACT, and it's a really good score in comparison to what a particular school is looking for, go ahead and send it.
Okay. Plus do you think that's going to help out as well if they score well on the SAT with financial?
It absolutely can.
Giving money, like how are they, offering scholarship money?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Thanks for that. That's a great question. Some schools have completely pivoted to GPA and class rank, that sort of thing, transcript data, for giving scholarships or merit aid. But to Anne Marie's point, wow, if we have a better than average SAT, ACT score, we need to be really considering sending that, because that only just strengthens that bid. In the olden days, the SAT and ACT were the ultimate arbiter. That's why it was such a crutch for colleges. They hated the idea of getting rid of the SAT, ACT, because they had built matrices and things like that that helped them understand what yield would look like. In other words, they could build a freshman class in advance based on predictive analysis as to, hey, this person with this SAT score and this GPA and this kind of profile, we can give this kind of discount to, and they're going to show up. So when the SAT kind of went away with the pandemic, they were like, oh no, okay, we can tell the admissions what to do. Now they had to actually translate all those grids into GPAs and such. So sorry for all the gobbledygook. The bottom line is, if we can execute the SAT and ACT well as a student to provide a good, solid or above average score for that particular college, definitely let's release those scores. It'll help on the money side too.
Okay.
Unless it's the University of California and they won't take them.
Yeah. There are some test blind schools. Caltech, forget it. You can't submit test scores. Even if you tried, they wouldn't take them.
Wow.
But that's like 3 or 4 schools in the country that are that way right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Glad you're here. Other questions?
I'm good.
Hello. Hey, thanks.
Okay. For the UC, the Cali schools, they've when they released their results, many of their applications had a very low yield,
Mhm.
and it like I checked the statistics, and they like would accept like 6,000 over 149,000. That's like almost 4%, which is like Ivy League level,
Oh yeah,
and it was across all of Cali. Do you think this will change in the near future,
I don't think
or
so. Yeah,
in
I think
terms of Cali schools, or
yeah, you have to remember California is its own world, right? I mean, they're over enrolled, they're impacted. That's the term they use. So they have an extreme problem. You probably saw the news article that came out where the California Supreme Court was trying to limit the Berkeley from, its class size. I think they've resolved that now, but yeah, Cali is a totally different animal. It's really, really, really difficult and getting harder and harder in this day and age to come in from out of state. Typically, you're in a separate applicant pool, and yeah, those 4% acceptance rate. I mean, Harvard, I mean, Stanford, Yale, Princeton, Duke, those are all kind of in that range. So I love California schools, but I'll tell you what, if we get into one, I've had parents say, yeah, it's great that my student made it into UCSB or whatever, but why would I pay $58,000 or whatever it is, the top line out of state tuition, and cost of attendance figure, when we can go straight here to, XYZ in-state public institution in Texas and pay a fraction. So that's part of the reason why we have to look at the balance of the schools list. But thanks for bringing that up. I mean, yes, definitely the Cal system schools are really, really hyper competitive, but the same goes for flagship research one schools like Michigan and UNC Chapel Hill and others that are highly visible, highly UVA, great example. It's super, super hyper competitive, just like an Ivy.
but would you say it's worth it in terms of applying to the UC schools? Like,
Depends on, that would be something to talk with your consultant about, because if you are highly dedicated to it and there's a burning desire to go, there's a saying in golf, never up, never in, meaning that if you're on the green and you're hitting the ball toward the cup, if you don't hit it hard enough, it's never going to go in the hole. So if you really want to apply to any of the UCs, absolutely do it, but just know going in that it's very, very difficult to gain acceptance.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, like I mentioned, I didn't have the minimum math score to gain acceptance to the school I ended up in. And I'll never forget my admissions rep in March. I'd not gotten the acceptance yet. And I decided, hey, I'm going to call my admissions rep. And I called him a bunch of times. Now, remember, this is 30 years ago. It's a long time ago. But the guy, I'll never forget this, crystal clear. It's like, Davila, you don't have the minimum math score. You need to go to a prep school for a year. And I said, well, okay, never mind. I've been admitted to UT. I'll just go there instead and go pre-med. And he said, okay, fine. I'll take your record to the admissions committee one more time, and I'll see if I can get you into the class, and call me in a week. And I called him in a week, and he said, okay, you're accepted. But you're going to have a hell of a time when you get here, and calculus and physics and all these courses. And I don't think I heard that. I just heard you're accepted. And sure enough, the next year I was sitting there sweating bullets during all of my calculus and physics and chemistry classes. So I should have gone to prep school. Anyway, more information than you probably wanted to know. Okay, other questions, gang?
Mike, I was wondering if how do you figure out who your admissions rep is for each school? Like, how do you know who to reach out to?
Fantastic question. I love it. Let me, am I sharing my screen still? I can't tell.
Yes.
Okay, great. So the easiest way to do this, Sherry, is Trinity admissions rep. Just Google it. And I'm not saying this to be blithe or cheeky, but it's hard to find this data if you go into the college's website directly. It's almost easier if you just Google it directly. And then you can look and see, for example, let me find ours. Morgan, at least she used to be. Let me see. I don't know what happened to her picture, but it's gone. Anyway, a lot of times what will happen is it'll tell you that Morgan is in charge of East Austin, Central Austin, whatever. And or the college will actually set up and tell you, have like a drop down menu where you could find out who your admissions rep is. Let me try just randomly another one. SMU admissions rep. Okay, meet your counselor, and then we just talk to our. So okay, you can see how it's, you know, select by state. I'm going to go to Texas, and then you have to go into your high school. So let's just put Lake Travis High School. Okay, and there's Destiny. So so you can hit her on email, you can call her, that sort of thing. So all good. So yeah, it's a really good thing too. So some schools like won't interview. Like I talked to Destiny a couple weeks ago. I said, hey, will you interview students? And she's like, no, we don't do it. TCU doesn't do it anymore either. So that's a great question to just reach out and say, hey, will you do interviews? And sometimes they'll say, hey, we'll talk with you when we get to Lake Travis High School on a school day or whatever. So, but great question, Sherry. Thanks for that. It's like I said, it's almost easier just to go Google the term, you know, college admissions rep, you know, boom, and then you're there.
And she might not interview, but you can certainly set up a virtual one-to-one appointment with her using that link right there. And you could almost turn that into an interview if you needed to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do any schools do interviews anymore? I feel like that's just not really a thing until you get perhaps to after you've already applied or something. I'm not sure.
The moderately selected private schools are the ones that I would say would be the most likely to gain an admissions interview with. Like, I don't know, let me give you a couple of examples. Like Austin College, Trinity. Actually, Trinity is pretty highly selective now, but you know,
Southwestern.
Southwestern, you know, St. Ed's, that sort of thing. But your Rice will actually do interviews. They have alumni interviewers that will do that. So it's kind of catch can. So it's a really great question. And that's the reason why I think, you know, directing that type of question to the admissions rep, they're going to know. They will love to hear that kind of thing. Hey, I'm interested in interacting with you. Is, you know, you're kind of raising your hand as a student. And as part of our consulting process, gang, if your student does get lined up, I don't care if it's in the senior year or if it's for a talent-based program. If your student needs to interview, please let us know. We will mock interview with your student right before the actual event. And those go generally really well for your student, no matter what. But I think helping a student who's may never have done any interviewing to do a mock interview beforehand is usually pretty helpful.
Thank you. And this isn't to like take up all the time, so I'm sorry. This is my last question.
No worries.
If you know someone like at the school, right? Like maybe you know a professor at the school, like how do you approach that? Or you know, to utilize those connections that you might have?
Yeah, very gently is the right answer. You know, I've had that question before in the past, and generally speaking, for hyper competitive schools, I've had parents connect the student with a professor, and then they will generally take the student in under their wing, talk with them about their research, you know, all those kinds of things. And sometimes that data gets fed into admissions through a back channel. That's all I could say. I'm no expert in it. You saw the Varsity Blues thing where people were photoshopping kids' faces onto, you know, crew, you know, pictures and stuff like that. That's not us. But definitely, I've seen, you know, parents that do have significant connections with institutions. And sure, there's usually some chit chat going back and forth. But it's usually pretty informal. That's what I would say.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. Great question.
Can I participate on that topic?
Sure.
Just add my 2 cents to that. I actually have a old boss of mine who is a professor at UT, law professor.
Mhm.
And I had actually reached out to him. Hey, could you help in any way to, you know, maybe he's like, I have absolutely no pull.
No pull. Yeah.
So I was going to try and go that avenue, but now he is not a current professor, but maybe a current one would help. But I had no luck.
Yeah, it's tough. It really is. And it really depends on the institution as well. I mean, so yeah, that's a great point. You know, there's 2,400 schools out there. You know, the bigger, the more prestigious, the harder to get into, the less luck we probably will have,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Yeah. Awesome. All right, gang. Well, I won't keep you much longer. If you do have other questions, feel free to text those in to your, through your students portal. Pick up the phone. Dee is our client relationship specialist. If she can't answer questions, she's forwarding the information to us and we're answering those. And we really appreciate the opportunity to work with your students. It is a blessing. We love what we do. And we're very grateful to work with your kiddos. So thanks for being here.
Sorry, like one quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like my last one.
Sure.
In regards to transferring into colleges, of like, for example, you get rejected
Yeah.
the first time, and then you wish to reapply, say, to the college of your dream or something,
Yeah.
for your graduate. Would you say it increases or decreases your chance? Like if you were to go to law school or a more specialized area, what would you say?
It's hard to say institution to institution. There are some schools that are like, okay, we really value our graduates, our undergraduates. Others are like, we want to build diversity into our graduate programs. Graduate programs are money makers for colleges. They just are. So sometimes it's, it's a deal in terms of what they see in you. Do you really help their profile? Are you going to be a full pay candidate? That sort of thing. The best advice I could give, Philippe, just from a general perspective, without knowing the programming or anything that you're going for, is that your undergraduate GPA tends to be the arbiter and any standardized test course, because certainly we're not going to be test optional over GRE or GMAT or LSAT or that sort of thing. So recommendations, experiences, the building of a resume, all of that stuff becomes hyper important. However, I will tell you that there are a lot of people now that are saying, all right, I didn't make it into UT for undergraduate. I want to go to medical school. I'll look at other opportunities like Trinity or Austin College or, XYZ, small private liberal arts college. That's just fine, because in a lot of cases, they're choosing really high caliber liberal arts or smaller programming and having smaller classes and getting better recommendations for teachers doing undergraduate research. And they have a leg up, when they go to apply for graduate school. So for those who don't make it into their top choice undergraduate school, if you're going for grad school, I'd say keep your chin up, just keep plugging and keep the eye on the prize, which is additional education, beyond the undergraduate. For me, when people ask me as an undergrad, hey, are you going to go to a graduate school? I'm like, no way, forget it. I'm 4 and out. This is it. But I ended up going to graduate school, and that was much later in life. And I will tell you, for me, what helped me get into graduate school was an extremely high GRE score. So I just pounded that test as hard as I could, because my recommendations were all super old, and my work experience mattered and things like that. So keep your chin up, go for the gusto initially, but don't fret if you have to go a different path. It's just fine.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Have a nice day.
Yeah, have a great night. All right, gang, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Anne-Marie, any other final parting shots?
No, just thanks everybody for being here. I hope it was helpful. Remember, we do these on a different topic every month, the third Monday of every month at 7. Hopefully you'll get reminder emails, usually a week or 2 ahead of these, but this is just another opportunity for us to have communication with our clients, and feel free to come. Thanks so much for being here.
All right, gang, have a great night. Thank you. Bye-bye.